Hi, everyone. My name is Erin Meyer. I'm the Sustainable Food Programs Coordinator at the University of California, Merced. We're here today to talk about sustainable fashion and unsustainable fashion and how it can be problematic and so on. So I'll keep that brief, my intro, and then we can just go around and do some brief intros with our panelists. So I'll just start with Samantha. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, my name's Samantha. I am the founder of sustainable sock company Teddy Locks. I used to be a marine biologist and wildlife TV producer working for Nat Geo, Animal Planet, etc. I gave that up when my eco-anxiety took over and I decided to try and help save the planet one plastic bottle at a time. And I recycle plastic bottles and upcycle textiles into insanely soft socks, all made in North Carolina.
Awesome. Man, we could talk a lot about eco-anxiety. Maybe we should not talk about it because it's stressful. All right, Judy, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Judy. By day, I am a full-time language pathologist, and then by night, I have another full-time job of running my Instagram page, which revolves around sustainable fashion.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, Dhamar. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yes, that was great. Thank you. Hi, all. Great to see you. My name is Dhamar Romo Chavez. I'm the community coordinator with FABSCRAP. FABSCRAP is a textile recycling nonprofit based in Brooklyn, New York. What we do is absorb all of the fashion, interior, and entertainment industry's pre-consumer textile waste, mostly created during the design process, and we sort it with our amazing group of volunteers to decide if it's recyclable or reusable.
Awesome. Thank you. Casey.
Hi, everyone. My name is Casey. I'm the founder, designer, and creative director for Sylven New York. I have a fully vegan and plant-based footwear brand. Everything's made in Italy. I design it here in New York. But I'm really focused on what are now being called next gen materials. So a big focus on vegan materials that are as nature derived as possible. So removing animals from my supply chain entirely, but also being focused on working with organic materials, namely apple leather is a big signature material I use. So it's made from organic food waste and just building in sustainable practices fully in a 360-degree holistic view, but I definitely focus a ton on materialization.
That's amazing because it's like all of my interests wrapped up into one. I'm vegan.
I'm assuming shoes are in there too.
Yeah, so
good.
Shoes.
Good.
Vegan. I hate food waste. Like I'm the surplus food reduction person. So fantastic. Well done. And we could talk about those textiles. I've got some questions about that too.
Awesome.
Paula, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Paula. I have a blog, a lifestyle, sustainable fashion and lifestyle blog called Miss Paula Presents. And I live in New York City with my 2 kids and my husband. By day, I'm mostly a stay-home mom. And when I have time, I write my blog, my Instagram account.
Awesome. All right, so we'll just dive into some questions. I've got some came in via the registration link. Also, if folks have questions, you can put them directly in the chat, or you can raise a hand and we can get it asked for you that way. And so I guess my first question for Casey, do these leathers, like the vegan leathers, do they work the same from like a manufacturing standpoint as other leathers? What are like the benefits and disadvantages to using other sort of materials for leather?
It's a super good question. So there's a lot of similarities, and I'm going to say the term leather to denote like animal leather, and then I'll use vegan leather to denote anything that's not made from animals. But durability wise is definitely something that is still being worked on. So if you're looking at a one-to-one comparison, some of these vegan leathers still don't have as long as of a lifespan, but there's definitely ways you can treat them and things you can do to work with them to extend that lifespan, and care and repair is a huge thing that we like to promote. Some of the vegan materials and when I say vegan, I'm also talking specifically about plant-based. So I'm kind of in a pretty specific space, but they're a little bit more lightweight. Like if you're going to wear a pair of leather boots versus a pair of apple leather boots, they like physically don't weigh as much. So they're a little bit easier to maneuver in. And then from like a technical standpoint, they don't have as much, like the material properties are a little bit different. So it can be, one of the challenges is very design driven and has to do with like the way my shoe factories are actually using the material. So if you think about like the curve of a boot, sometimes we have to design in additional seams where like an animal leather will have a little bit more stretch. Some of these plant-based and vegan leathers in general, you'll see a lot of boots that have a center seam or things designed into them because they don't move and bend the same way. So some of that challenge is also when you're working with a factory and they've never used something like apple leather, it comes with a little bit more prototyping and a little bit more time in the development phase, because there's going to be kind of a learning curve because they move slightly differently when they're actually being used for their end result, which in my case is always shoes at the moment.
Ooh, at the moment though.
We've got big plans over here.
Yay. Okay, we'll keep an eye out on you. All right. Can I learn a little bit and we learn a little bit more about FABSCRAP?
Absolutely, yes. I can kind of just walk through the different arms of FABSCRAP, starting with our recycling service. So what we do is provide any brand who signs up with service a black or brown bag, and this kind of just denotes if they are saying it's proprietary material, therefore it can't be reused, it should only be shredded by our internal FABSCRAP team, or they put it into a brown bag, which means it can be reused and we can do whatever we would like with it. So we have a pickup service, a partnership where they actually go to the studios and offices of each of the brands we work with. They pick up those bags, we bring them into our Brooklyn Army Terminal warehouse, and then they're consolidated. And we sort about 80% of the incoming material as it comes in. We have about 3,000 to 5,000 pounds of pickups per week. And we're sorting, as I mentioned, about 80% of that. That kind of moves us into our volunteer arm. So the volunteer sessions that I lead twice a day, 5 days a week, are 3 hours long, where volunteers are able to take home 5 pounds of fabric for free after the session. And they're basically sorting and deciding the materials that should be recycled, which is downcycled into an insulation material called shoddy. And then the reusable materials are filtered into our reused room, or a fabric thrift store in the Brooklyn Army Terminal. So that is basically how we reuse materials. It's also filtered into our online store where it's able to reach across the country. So that's kind of the broad overview of FABSCRAP, but if anyone has any questions, would love to answer those.
Awesome, thank you. So for the bloggers, we've got a ton of bloggers. I don't also know if like Casey, you blog on your own too, or Dhamar, or some of the other folks. But what are some of your recommendations for someone who wants to start a sustainable fashion blog?
I could go ahead and jump in. I guess it's to just do it, to not be scared about what other people are going to think, to, you know, if you're passionate about something, then your passion will show. And yeah, I think like, it's just being fully transparent when you're talking about sustainable fashion, talking about, you know, what your journey is like, and just remembering that like progress over perfection, like you don't have to snap and be a perfectly sustainable person to be a sustainable fashion blogger. So that would be my piece of advice. You have anything to add, Paula?
You said everything perfectly. Just to echo what Judy said, like I know Judy, we met via social media. Nice to see you in this. Yeah, I would say just started, you know, social media is very heavily fast fashion focused, but there is such a vibrant and welcoming sustainable fashion community. Like I would say that there's so much I've learned from the communities. I would say just join. Like I've learned so much about thrifting from Judy. I love her vlog and thrifting all over the world. I love your stuff, but there's just so much that we've learned, like, you know, you learn from the community. So I would say start. It's not overwhelming, because pretty much the best way to be sustainable is to actually wear and style what you have. So I think it's just it's a much easier space to go into. It's not as hard. You don't have to be shopping all the time, you know, as a case with, you know, the rest of fashion blogging. So I would say start, and there's a wonderful community. So if you want to start, there's a wonderful community that is there to support you, and yeah, and just be there for you.
Awesome, thank you. Samantha, so you focus on socks. Why socks?
It's a great question. Essentially, socks are worn by almost everybody. They are the most disposed of item in our wardrobe. And in terms of a talking point, rather than just the sustainable footprint of the product, it's a great gift and a great conversation piece. So, you know, wearing a pair of Teddy Locks, if you're out and about with your friends, you can talk about that. If you're gifting it to someone, you can talk about it. And also just being accessible in general. As you know, it was a bit of a large leap from being a wildlife TV producer to being in manufacturing and the textiles fashion industry. So it needed to be something that I was passionate about. And I feel like each individual can make their own personal impact and help lower their own footprints by taking on a simple switch, which is going from, you know, a readily disposed of product that may not have been made sustainably to one that's quite the opposite.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to dive into some of the questions that were asked via the registration form. And so anyone can jump in here. One question was, why don't entry-level sustainability positions exist?
I think the question really depends on the type of job you're looking for there, whether you're looking to be an environmental consultancy, and whether that's like in oil, or whether you're talking about in something specifically like fashion. There's a lot of research that goes in and a lot of data. That isn't to say that you can't learn those things, and you absolutely can. But I would say that at the moment, this is a very niche environment and there aren't enough people in the space. So the brands that are looking for people to take on those roles probably are looking for people who either know people or know all the answers, because they need a lot of problems fixed. So that's probably why they're looking for experience. But I wouldn't say to be put off by that. Look for internships, approach brands, whether you're doing a week or 3 months, all of it will build up your experience, and you'll see so much that goes on behind a product. It isn't just, you know, the customer facing stuff. There's all kinds that you can get involved with.
I just want to add to that too, that there's so many ways to practice sustainability, and so many companies that are completely in the dark or really need help. And I think the fact that you don't see an entry-level position could also be an amazing opportunity to reach out to someone and be like, hey, what if you tried XYZ? Are you considering how you recycle your textiles at the end of, you know, if you have leftovers, or, you know, like kind of using that opportunity to parlay into maybe making your own entry-level position, because if they don't have it, they probably need it.
And although I don't work directly in the space, I have my own fashion blog, but I would say even like volunteer opportunities, like Dhamar talked about at FABSCRAP, they do have volunteer sessions, and those are great opportunities to meet people and to learn more about you know, the industry, sustainability in general. In fact, I'm probably going to reach out to Dhamar, because you're in Brooklyn, and just figure out how I can volunteer, because there's so much that I don't know, you know. So volunteering is a great way. You can just network and meet a lot of people as well.
Awesome. All right. In the food system, there's a lot of issues, you know, from waste to labor to food insecurity, policy issues. I assume that fashion can be similar, you know, issues with materials being unsustainable, issues with labor. I mean, that could be a panel on its own. But we're mentioning we're mentioning things like that we don't know about. Are there any underlooked issues that we should know about regarding unsustainable fashion? That might be a hard question.
Really, to be honest with you, this is a very broad space, and there's no truly sustainable system right now. We have a lot of waste in all industries, and we need a lot of technological advancements. From my perspective and the 404 days of research and development that I did, really we just have too many things already on this planet that need to be rehomed. So the more that we can look at using and creating a circular economy, making second homes and utilizing the materials we already have, the better place that we will be.
I think something too that often people don't really think about is consumerism and just the rate that we consume. I mean, you know, especially in being in the social media space, what's so common is like haul culture. You know, here's my Shein haul, here's my Forever 21 haul. So it's making that shift from, you know, not only stop shopping at fast fashion brands, but also like think about how much you're buying, because you can easily replace what, you know, is a fast fashion addiction or a shopping addiction with a thrifting addiction, and you're just consuming at the same rate, and that is also unsustainable in itself. So that's also another topic that I think we can look at.
I was going to mention something along the same line as Judy, where it's the actual like consumer habits and what we're doing in that area. And I think it connects a little bit more into like socially how we behave, but I won't get too much into that. Mostly just as far as how we are interacting with the materials and how we value them. I think that mindset could be shifted as much as technological advances are needed, and they're so important, and moving to a circular economy will solve so many issues. If we continue to make these advancements without shifting our consumer habits and how we think about items, it sadly just isn't going to be the big enough change we need. So I definitely feel like it's overlooked and not talked about as strongly as it could be, as far as just like consumerism habits.
So I just also wanted to add something. I know people talk about this a lot. Like even we've forgotten some of like the fundamental skills that people had before. So that's why we're always buying stuff. So for example, mending and you know, repairing our clothes. You know, some of us who are a little bit older, some of those skills were taught in school, but they're not really taught anymore. So, you know, it's like if something gets ruined, you just get a hole in something, you throw it away. And I just think, you know, generally it should be supported, you know, through education, because I mean, I don't do it enough anymore, but I was actually taught those things in school. We learned how to repair and sew things. And, you know, if you don't have that type of culture instilled in people from when they're young, they're not going to know how to do these things as well.
Excellent points. Awesome. And just as another update, if anyone has any questions, feel free and throw them in the chat as you would like. So this one's coming in from Emma. What is the most effective way to broach the broad topic of sustainable fashion to a large audience and make it feel accessible?
I think I can just add, given that I do have a blog, I don't have a broad, large audience, but I think one way to make it seem more accessible is to not, you know, shame and guilt people. Instead, maybe inspire them with the alternatives. You know, fast fashion is very dominant and is what most people have exposure to. But, you know, if you go very heavily and very heavy in your messaging and shame people for something that they don't really have so much control over because it's what is readily available. It causes some people to freeze and just get, just back away because they're like, okay, here she goes again. She's just shaming us and making us guilty. But you can inspire people without just making them super shaming them, because it's really what is readily available, but just inspire them instead and provide some alternatives.
I think it's also shifting our mindset on what sustainable fashion is, right? Like you don't have to shop at, you don't have to buy from a sustainable fashion brand to consider yourself as someone who's passionate about sustainable fashion. Maybe you just stop shopping in general. Maybe you just, just wear what's in your closet and do clothing swaps with your friends. Like I know that, sometimes, because that's something that my audience tells me, is that sustainable fashion brands can be expensive, which I understand, but that doesn't mean that you can't make the shift towards sustainable fashion and it's not accessible, because you can just wear what you already own, you can thrift, and things like that. So.
In terms of reaching a broad audience, I would say follow on a bit with what Paula was saying there. It's about positivity. I think, especially the last 2 years, people can't really handle any more doom and gloom. And before the pandemic, we were seeing, the turtle shots with the straws, and we're not seeing that as much anymore. Instead, you can point them in the direction of things that are making a difference. There are organizations like Plastic Bank, Ocean Cleanup. Like just following those people on Instagram is like so inspiring, and you'll see thousands of comments, people saying thank you so much for cleaning up our oceans, and it just helps us to understand the personal impact that we have and the difference that we can make. And although large corporations need to be held more accountable, we can all make a difference, and it is the simple switches. And with that, I would also just add that if you think about just day-to-day life, with like when you get a referral or a recommendation, how valuable that is to you because you heard it from a friend, and you'll go and support that brand or subscribe or whatever it might be. And I would just say the same thing applies here, like encouraging people, sharing what you've learned as you go about your own journey through sustainability. I think that can in and of itself have a big impact.
Yeah, I agree too. And I think that applies to sustainable food as well. The research suggests that when you shame people, like stop wasting food, this is what happens, like it goes in one ear and out the other. So I agree wholeheartedly on like the not shaming, as well as just keeping it positive. So thank you for those perspectives. So another question, what is your advice to a new graduate who wants to work in the field of sustainable fashion?
My favorite thing to tell to new graduates is figure out sort of what you're excited about. And it doesn't have to be anything at all related to what a brand does. It can be like a hobby you have, or maybe you want to write a list of like the brands that you admire, whether or not they're sustainable, and then find a way to get into the smallest company you can find that does some of that stuff, and you'll get the most hands-on experience you can. And some people love a big company, and I think that's, you got to do what works for you. But when you find something or people who are aligned with the things that you like, specifically if it's sustainability driven, like the smaller the team, the more that you're going to be the one actually carrying out so many of the tasks and kind of learning and growing with the company as you go. And they're like, it's basically like boot camp, going to a super small brand, and kind of helping them do things from the ground up.
Awesome. All right, so can you share your views on localizing textile production as a potential solution to equity and environmental degradation?
I could probably speak to this a little bit. I built my supply chain entirely based in North Carolina. The bottles are collected from the East Coast of the US, processed in North Carolina, and from that point, they don't leave North Carolina. That was extremely important to me because from the off, before the product is even made, we've reduced emissions just through transport alone. 100%, I'm a big advocate for producing locally, supporting manufacturers locally, but mostly because it does reduce our impact on the planet. So yeah, I have nothing bad to say about that suggestion. Go for it.
I'll piggyback on that in terms of like keeping your supply chain lean for footwear in particular. Like all my factories are abroad. Everything I do is in Italy, and I personally, in my professional experience, having worked with footwear, I believe wholeheartedly that Italy makes the best shoes in the world. But unfortunately, I'm here in the US and there really isn't infrastructure for footwear manufacturing in this country. There was at one point, and there are like probably fewer than 10 shoe factories that exist in the United States right now. So the capability for producing certain things just unfortunately is not currently in the United States. But I do keep all my supply chain super lean, and it's something that's a very active and conscious decision, very similarly, because you want to make sure that you're lowering your transport costs, keeping everything super tight. So I talked about using apple leather. The apples themselves that are food waste are actually coming from the highest, they're coming from a region in Tyrol. It's like the highest producer of apple food products, juices and jams in the entire European Union. So like the apples are coming from Italy. The material company that's making the apples into apple leather is 45 minutes north of my factories. Then the shoes themselves are being produced with those Italian apples and the Italian apple leather in those factories. So I think it's important to figure out too, like where are the products being made, and kind of leaning into that supply chain. And of course, if we could build out the infrastructure for footwear in the United States, that would be super cool, but that could also probably be its whole own other panel.
Awesome. This is a really random question specifically for you, Casey. What kind of apples are they?
I get this question all the time. I haven't been to the region of Tyrol. I started working with them in 2019, and I haven't been to Italy since 2019 because of everything going on in the world. And I wish I could tell you like the apple varietal, but I can tell you that like I can tell you exactly where the orchards are and the types of food products they're making, but I haven't yet gone to I would love to go to the orchard, and I'm sure it's got a beautiful Italian name, but I'll do some research, come up with the apple varietal so that I can have that like at a moment's notice ready to go.
Awesome. Yeah, like I'm just picturing like these beautiful green sour apples being then pummeled and turned into like vegan leather.
Yeah, I've seen photos of the orchards. They kind of look like gala apples. They're like sort of the red and green combo. Like it looks like it's the Italian Alps. So if you could picture, I feel like the Swiss Alps are kind of something that we're more familiar with in terms of imagery. It's the same, it's just on the Italian border. So it's beautiful rolling mountains, gorgeous multi-tonal apples. So I'll paint the picture.
Awesome, thank you for painting that. We've had a couple of new folks join. Joanne, hi, welcome.
Thank you. Apologies for being late. My last meeting went over, but thank you for having me.
Yeah, no worries. Do you want to do a quick little introduction of yourself and your work?
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. So I'm here today representing the California Product Stewardship Council. We're a nonprofit. We're primarily funded by cities and counties who basically want help with their waste programs, but in a manner that engages the industry so that they're not just throwing money at waste. But my background is actually, I spent 14 years at UC Davis in the Department of Textiles doing research and teaching. So actually, it's nice to always connect back with the UC system and different campuses. So I'm really happy to be here. And I did share it with my contacts at UC Davis. So I'm not sure if anyone made it, but hopefully.
We do have at least one person from Davis. At the start of the session, I had folks put in where they're zooming in from, and at least one person, yeah, from Davis. So super cool. Thank you for joining. So we've asked a couple of questions. I'll just ask you a couple of ones that might be specific or pertinent. We had some that came in from the registration link. One question was, can you share your views on localizing textile production as a potential solution to equity and environmental degradation? That's the one we were just kind of wrapping up. Do you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Oh, the production side of it needs to be brought onshore very badly. I mean, there's entire gaps of the circular economy that are missing. And I think the production side of it is everything that people don't talk about in waste. Because we can collect all day and we can make pellets all day, but if someone's not taking that extra step of producing something from the pellets and producing something from the recycled yarns, but yeah, we definitely are interested in production. We work closely with FaBSCRAP and some of our policy development, and I know that production, especially, I call it like the tail end of the circular economy. Once you've collected the materials and you've processed them, you have to actually get them back into production. So the connection between environmental degradation, I think as long as you're dealing with the post-consumer materials, that connection's really clear. But just producing more goods just because they're produced in California, I don't know if that really solves the problem.
So you've used this term a couple of times, circular economy. Could you give us like kind of just a brief definition of what that means?
Yeah, and it's funny, it's such a trendy word that I actually try to keep it out of my reports. But it's just this idea of keeping materials into perpetual reuse and keeping them valued. So, and I think the value is on the materials functionality. So keeping fabrics as fabric and keeping, you know, carpet as carpet, or reusing and repurposing keeps things valued at its highest potential. But I know there's a lot of different models for the circular economy. There's like the butterfly model, and there's like the 3-tiered where, you know, eventually things get downgraded. But at the end of the day, nothing's infinity. And when actually you spend a few years in trash, you just kind of realize how bad it is. And I think there's just this shared like commisery of people working in waste that yeah, recycling is not going to get us out of it. So the circular economy is not just about getting waste into use, it's about valuing the materials, keeping them out of recycling, and ultimately just reducing the generation, or source reduction, as we call it.
Awesome, thank you. Maybe another question too that you can answer. What is your advice to a new graduate who wants to work in the field of sustainable fashion?
Well, now it's actually a term in job descriptions, but when I graduated, looking for a job that changes the system, like they're not going to advertise like, hey, change everything we've been working hard for. So I think you'll have it a little bit easier when it comes to keywords coming up into the job postings. And I had a hell of a time finding this job. I didn't even know what stewardship meant at my interview, and I had to admit that. But being honest and being true to what you want to do, and finding what those tasks are, because again, like your title doesn't always match the tasks, because not everyone has sustainability in their title. Like mine's a special projects manager, like has nothing to do with sustainability on like, and how the job description's written. But what I'm doing and my impact is towards sustainability. So I would say really focus on what tasks you want to do. Do you want to present and educate? Do you want to write? Do you want to design? Like, what are the functions? Like, what do you want to fill your day doing? And then work from there. Because I think there's a lot of, when I have a new hire or a job applicant who's like, oh, I'm an expert in sustainability, like that's a red flag. Like nobody really, sustainability is like a huge umbrella term. Like I'm an expert in economics. Like what does that mean? So I would say be specific. Is it land use? Is it water use? Like what is it? I'm trash. Like I'm a trash focus. That's my pillar of sustainability. It's where my lane is. It's where my networks are. And so it does, obviously it crosses over in green design, but really focusing on what I do in my task. I'm an educator. So I make slides and I write articles and I meet with interesting groups and I have interesting conversations so that we can all kind of learn together, because sustainability hasn't been achieved yet. So it's a movement, right? So we all have to be just headed in that direction. So I guess my advice would be really focused like critically on what tasks you want to fill your day with. Like we have interns that don't last more than a few weeks in our job. I'll be honest, like it's fast paced. You have to read an article and digest it in less than an hour. You might have to prepare testimony and not know who the audience, or, you know, there's a lot of things that just people don't like about our job, but, you know, on social media, it looks like a fabulous job. We do policy, we do education, but task-wise, right? It's reading, it's editing, it's presentations. So if those aren't your tasks, then, you know, really focus on what you want. And I will say, having gone to school for so long, they really train you on, right? Like what's academia? What's a career in academia gonna look like, right? You get to see it. You see your professors, you see grad students on campus. And I think there's a lot of discussion on government, right? You understand a little bit in some of your classes, but I don't feel like nonprofits are really talked about enough in an academic setting and what those jobs look like. Because I tell you, I'm probably having more fun here than I would if I was still at Davis, because I have a bigger platform. There's fewer rules. But I didn't even know what a nonprofit did, honestly, when I kind of went to my interview. It was kind of a random interview, I'll just be honest. I found the job posting. I'd been searching for months, maybe even close to a year, where I'm like, I studied sustainable textiles, but I wanted to stay, you know, in Sacramento. And I found this job posting. It was a month expired and it was for assistant director. And I'm like fresh out of grad school. I'm like, well, I want to apply anyways, because it actually has the word sustainability in it and it's where I want to live. And I ended up getting an interview from that. And I think what I loved about it is I was just authentic. I didn't get that position. I didn't even get the job for 6 months after that. But when it worked out and really understanding, okay, I still get to educate, I still get to research, I still get to write. But what does that mean and how is it different than academia? I will say one of the things I miss the most is my actual classroom. Like an actual, like having a cohort of students for 10 weeks. I do miss that. So I think that, sorry if that's a long rant, but I think not everyone has to go into working for a brand to be in sustainability.
I agree. There was so much there that I wanted to resonate with, but one thing too, you're talking about how like you're the trash person and so am I, like, and there's a bunch of jokes I could make about like my life is wasted. All I think about is trash, but it's like actually not trash. It's really valuable. It's, you know, valuable food and all of those things. So thank you for that really great answer. So someone mentioned eco-anxiety too. Would you like to define eco-anxiety and maybe provide some examples of how you cope with eco-anxiety?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think I referenced it when I said that shared co-misery earlier. I'm like, oh yeah, especially when in trash, when you realize the volume, truly the volume of what's being generated out there. I think so many of we see what's in our house and we might have an understanding of like seeing the trucks go by, but if you really understood the trash that's generated across cities, across the states, and then in places that don't have education on waste, I think it's this feeling of hopelessness that you try so hard. We work 10-hour days and you don't feel like you're making an impact. But I think when you're working with generational changes, we're never going to see, I don't want to say never, but it's really the next generation that will see that impact. And I think one of the things that is so under talked about, but gives me major anxiety is the microplastics in the water and in the soil. Like, they are so prevalent, and the research is just starting to touch that tip of the iceberg. But I think, again, we can stop the trash, but there's already the plastics in the water. So hope y'all sleep well at night. Sorry.
I just wanted to add my experience with echo anxiety. So right now I am in the process of moving, and I have lived in the same apartment for 5 years. And I consider myself as somebody that is, environmentally aware, but I'm also a person in a world that is very unsustainable, and I have kids. And so I'm packing stuff. I'm trying to, organize things. And there's so much stuff that can't really be recycled, easily. And there's just so much. So I'm just looking and I'm just wondering. So like when I'm looking at something, I'm just saying like, what can I do with this? How can I actually dispose of this? It's very, it's challenging, but I think people should realize that, eco anxiety is real, but you're not in it alone. You shouldn't take the weight of the world on your shoulder, but try your best. Like now for me, I was telling my husband that we are truly going to try to be as low waste as possible when we move, because this is ridiculous. There's just so much, and we have so much less than most people. But I think just packing up and looking at stuff, just figuring out that actually there's just so much stuff that I have that I probably didn't need. I wish there was more availability of things that you could actually borrow. I think my sister sent me an article, but I don't think it's in the United States, but where you can actually borrow things that you need for your home that you don't have to use all the time. I just wish there was more opportunities for things like that, because you might need something for a specific period of time, but you don't need it forever. I just wish there was more things like that. Stuff like that would make things a lot easier for people, so that we can waste less and consume less. But it's a lot.
I think for me personally, I was traveling a lot professionally, and I came from a science background, and it's, for me, the definition kind of eco-anxiety is really just similar to what Joanne was saying. It's helplessness over something that is huge that you don't have control over. And it got quite severe for me personally. I felt that convenience has become king. And to be honest, I'm now at peace with, I don't think that is changing. That is not the thing that will change. So whether, like Paula just said, whether we can have a platform, they do exist, but sparsely, platforms where you basically say, borrow my drill. Not everyone needs a drill 365 days a year. But I went quite extreme. I gave up buying anything for 2 years. I didn't thrift, didn't buy anything new. I didn't buy any objects, or literally I can't think of anything that I bought other than food for like 2 years, and then was trying to live a zero waste life. But the pressure that put on my family and my friends, and then my eco anxiety actually got worse, feeling like I was failing, trying to be perfect. And many people will have seen that we don't need 1 billion people doing it perfectly, we need 1 billion people doing it imperfectly. And right now we probably don't even have 100,000 people trying to do it perfectly. So the more we can all do, the better. And I think we've got to be all in this together and all on the same page and moving in the right direction. So I think just knowing that, like, just the little bits that you do are making a difference, and that, signing petitions has a big impact. You can reduce your own eco anxiety, and maybe remove the accounts that are bringing the negative, because there's a lot of conflicting information out there. And I think in the sustainability space, there's always people at the top arguing whether one material is better than another, or you should be doing this and you shouldn't be doing that, when in reality there are hundreds of thousands of companies not doing any of it. And we need to stop being too intense and too harsh on the brands and the companies that are really trying to make a difference, and start putting pressure on the masses, really. That's my opinion.
And I also wanted to add, I just wish brands would take more responsibility of their waste for their products. There are some brands that are doing that. Like I know some beauty brands, you can actually send stuff back and they will dispose of it. But there's just so much there's a lot of pressure that's being put onto the final consumer. But you have to be responsible for what you produce. I can give an example, not to talk so badly about the brand, but Pringles, for example, the cans can't be recycled, and Pringles are eaten every day. My kids, they were banned in my house for a while, but then they came back in. They come back in once in a while because my daughter really loves them. But I just wish there was more responsibility, and I guess that's policy. And I think it would put less pressure on the individual consumer if more was happening at the top, more support from government to just make these type of changes. Just, make it, sorry, my daughter's just coming and I'm just I can't believe she's coming when I'm in this panel, but just more, more changes from the top to just make things easier, make things more recyclable, and make brands more responsible.
That might be a good segue to what CPSC specializes in, which is, it's called extended producer responsibility. And it's a really specific type of policy, usually at the state level, but you can pass it at the local level too, if the local county is willing to go to court, because it always gets contested. But basically, when you look at the types of policies that are available, bottles and cans are a deposit, right? You pay the money and you should be getting it back, but other people or the county can get that money back. Then you have things like fees, like on tires or your computer, you pay a fee, and then that covers it. But then there's these other types of programs, which are called EPR or product stewardship programs, where the fee is actually paid by the brand. And the money doesn't go to the government, it goes to a nonprofit. And the nonprofit, who's industry funded, the rules on how they operate get set in the law. Like, you have to take in all carpet, you have to recycle at least 30% of what you take in, you have to reuse at least 100,000 pounds a year. So you put the program operation rules, but the government doesn't run the program. And punchline is that they run better than any government run program. And people don't really realize that in California, we have 12 of these types of programs. In Europe, they've had these types of waste programs for over a decade. They have 30 different EPR programs in Europe. Canada has probably 12 to 20 different EPR programs for bottles and tires and batteries. But here in California, especially in a capitalist society that allows lobbying, it actually is so difficult to pass these types of laws because the industry often frames it as you're charging us money, you're increasing costs. But the truth is, someone's going to pay for it either way. And right now, you're paying it through your trash bill. And right now, everyone's rent's already high. Our trash bills are already high to deal with the bottles and cans. If we wanted to do a textiles bin, everyone's bill would go up, and that doesn't solve a lot of the problems. So the theory is behind EPR is if you charge the industry the fee and not the consumers, they are incentivized to make the products greener, to make them more recyclable, and to make the program more cost efficient because they have to pay for that program. And then that also goes with the theory that the government can't run as good of a program, which is kind of true. So here in California, we have 12 EPR and product stewardship programs, and they're all a little bit different. But we have for carpet, we have mattresses, which do have a fee that consumers pay, but the government doesn't run the program. So you might see the Bye Bye Mattress advertisements, you might see carpet recycling advertisements, and our government doesn't pay for those. The Stewardship program does. So for textiles and clothing, France has an EPR program, which has a lot of flaws to it. The UK has proposed a textiles EPR program, which mimics France's. It's not great. The Canadians have proposed one as well in 2023. I think they're going to bring it on. But here in California, we have 12 better programs, and the way we pass laws are really different than how they pass laws in Canada and UK. So what CPSC does is we sponsor legislation and we do education. So part of my goal is we're gonna introduce an EPR bill in 2023 for textiles and clothing. So I spend the next year educating people like you, so you know what is EPR. And when the industry gets a hold of the news and they say, California is raising fees on clothing, you understand, well, no, we're investing in sustainability. Where is the money going to come from to bring recyclers and pellet extruders to California? Like, you need to have a pool of funds available. And that's what EPR really offers, is private funds that are equitable, meaning everyone can access them, not just the big brands. And it funds things like transportation. Like, who wants to pay to send rags from Merced to a recycler in Sacramento? Like, that's a pure loss in a business side. You're sending rags and then you pay again to recycle it. But in an EPR program, they cover 100% of those costs. They internalize those damages that have been paid by other people for so long. So ultimately, if we want more recycled content and we want more upcycled clothing, we have to get those materials to the designers. So EPR does the logistics, they do the transportation, they do the sorting, and they pay for it. Because right now the thrifts can't afford it. Look what's happening, getting dumped in other countries. The value isn't there for the thrifts to sort out all the different polymers. So without the economic incentives of a fee, I know it's scary, but there has to be a fee somewhere. Without that economics, it's not really going to ever work in a circular economy. So I'm a little pessimist today, sorry.
That's okay. So just real quick in the chat too, I don't know if y'all have heard of TerraCycle, but they've got a UK and a US presence. I was curious if they work with Pringles. They do in the UK. So if you lived in the UK, you could send your Pringles cans to TerraCycle and they would recycle them. So maybe that's something we also need to advocate for, bringing that to the US.
He's the king of downcycling. I have publicly made fun of him. I'm sorry, I gotta keep it up. I'm sorry, I don't think TerraCycle is a good company. They really just melt everything down. That's all they're doing is they're taking really hard to manage products, adding heat without any air regulations in states that don't regulate their air. And they're melting it down with no products that we don't see what their end product's chemical content is. So there's no incentive for the companies to change their design if TerraCycle is willing to just melt it down for them. So I appreciate the effort, but I do have to, I've already started a public battle with them. I got to carry it through.
That's fine. I actually didn't know that. Thank you for educating me on that. We do have 3 minutes and I want to wrap up with like one of my favorite questions that I ask folks. So if you had a magic wand and you could fix one thing about the fashion world, what would it be?
Less plastic, like less synthetics, more natural.
Nice.
Mine would definitely be ethical practices, paying fair living wages, having safe working environments for the people that make our clothes. That should be absolutely mandatory in 2022.
I agree with what Joanne and Samantha both said. Like both of those things, especially just, putting people first, like Samantha was saying,
And I want to say, yeah, everything that everybody has said, ethical production, putting people first, and also just starting to make better quality clothes again. Like we all say that vintage is so much better quality. Yeah, because they used to make better quality clothes then. That's why we could actually wear clothes for a long time. And then also not force trends on people. That's why we're always buying things all the time. I mean, like, it's too much, you know, like we don't have to walk out looking like we're in a fashion runway to be amazing. So I just wish like the fashion industry would stop pushing that on us, you know.
I would say some sort of financial penalty or financial incentive to have the fashion industry produce less. Whereas like they have either like a cap of how much you can produce or you're penalized. But also, Paula, I think that you can walk out into the world like you're in a fashion show every day without causing like damage to anyone else. Like you can do it. We have everything we need already. But definitely push trends just cause overconsumption. So totally get what you're saying.
Any final thoughts? Awesome. All right, I have one final thought. I'm gonna actually I'll just send you a private message, Casey and Samantha. I'll send you my address so you can send me some socks to wear with your shoes. Your vegan leather shoes and your super comfy socks. That's a joke, don't worry. All right, thank you all. This has been really interesting and enlightening. I feel like I've learned so much, but I also think I have a lot still to learn. So thank you so much for coming. And I mean that as in SEW. Have a fantastic rest of the day and onward. Thanks all.
Thank you. Have a good night.